Welcome to Man Cove Wellbeing and the My Trauma, Your Trauma series with me, Owen Morgan. I want to share my trauma journey and that of others. We will also look at the world of trauma healing, support and research, including guests who specialise in helping those overcome their trauma. My Trauma, Your Trauma is here to explore human experience. Welcome to Trauma Chat, where we invite on a guest to talk all things trauma. Please watch and listen with care. Some of this content may be triggering or may make you feel uncomfortable, so do press that stop button and take a break. Always put yourself first. I'm a mental health advocate and a massage therapist, and I have interviewed hundreds of wellness experts over the last 5 years, and I want to give a voice to those who can inspire others to improved wellness. So today it's episode 4. If you haven't had a chance already, go back and check the first 3 episodes. Some amazing chats. But I'm really excited today to bring on Tom Hatton of Holistic Transitioning. Tom is a holistic practitioner who views transformation through a whole person lens, working with clients to identify obstacles, adjust their behaviors, and maintain consistency. He believes in the human potential for transformational growth. He supplemented his MSc Counseling and Psychotherapy with a performance coaching diploma alongside studying cognitive and affective neuroscience. Whoa, that was a big intro. How are we today, Tom?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm doing well. I feel excited for this. It's the weekend, so it's nice to have some relaxing time ahead. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to kind of delving into some of my experiences, and hopefully they'll be inspirational for people.
Yeah, well, these shows just need to be what they need to be: raw, powerful, and hopefully really insightful for those listening. So how are you finding lockdown? Because what is it, week 8 now, isn't it, in England for the current virus stuff?
Yeah, lockdown's going relatively well. We're obviously going to my experiences in a bit, but my past experiences left me in a place unable to socially engage with people. So I actually socially isolated myself for a good 6 months. I only saw a handful of people. Those people I really trusted, I knew obviously since day one. So it feels like going back into that experience. But I suppose I was fortunate enough to find some meaning in it all and use the time to develop myself and pick up a new adventure. And I often say that nothing sharpens the mind like a new adventure. And I mean, from a neurological standpoint, it's because you get a flood of norepinephrine because of the novelty of it all and the dopamine. And so it kind of keeps you focused. So I've just been trying to keep myself occupied with new activities.
Yeah, everyone's going to have a different story going for this, aren't they? But I think finding a sense of safety, because, you know, it's a very unknown thing. There's a lot of fear. So I think finding elements of safety on a day-to-day basis, I think, is the most important thing, isn't it, right now? Be it people or activities or whatever it may be. But I'm glad you're doing okay. And I know a lot of us holistic practitioners or advocates seem to be able to use it as a force for focusing more on our online presence. So not necessarily a bad thing. And people need us right now online too. So really helpful. So before we get into a bit more about your story and things you've been through, do you want to let us know quickly a little bit more about holistic transitioning and kind of your, not necessarily your journey into your business, but what your business is doing right now?
Yeah, so I mean, the reason for starting the company was because the only thing that really seemed to help me progress out of what I was in was taking a very holistic approach to my lifestyle. Now, lots of people think of holistic as being crystals and tarot reading cards and things like that. And that is one element of it. And lots of people who refer to themselves as a holistic practitioner use those quite spiritual, I suppose, approaches. And I'm very spiritual in my own way. But for me, holistic means to look at the whole and to see how the parts of a system are relating to one another and to understand context and to kind of really focus on the relationship dynamics between you and an experience, or you and the meaning you've given the experience. So we started the company because taking the holistic approach to my lifestyle by focusing on my mind, my body, my relationships, and all of the kind of subcompartments of those areas was what was empowering me. And I managed to pull myself out of what I was in and go on to start the company. And that's really kind of been the rocket fuel. So I work now as a psychotherapist. I was studying psychotherapy and a bit of neuroscience whilst all of it was going on, but I obviously couldn't work with clients. I had to kind of just focus on the theoretical side of it all. So at the moment, Holistic Transition has 3 pillars. One of them is one-to-one services. So me as a psychotherapist and a coach. We also have other coaches involved now. We have massage therapists. We have sound healing people, personal trainers, nutritionists. That's the one-to-one. Then we have the public side of it all, which was public workshops when obviously we weren't in COVID-19. Now it's going to be a kind of community platform that it's just evolved into. And then the third pillar is the corporate outreach. I work closely with companies to install corporate wellness initiatives into their structure and hopefully change culture. And those 3 pillars are kind of the foundational blocks of our mission, which is to guide people through a transitional journey to rediscover their power.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I met you through Instagram, and I just saw, I went to your website and saw a little video of stuff you were doing. And I just thought, this is, not only is this really convenient for right now with COVID-19 and everything, but also I think that's where a lot of the future lies, isn't it? Is having easier access to such things. And also everyone relates to something differently as well. So the fact that you surround yourself with a really awesome team offering different things is really powerful too. Because they always say if any therapist ever says their way is the only way to help somebody, then that's a problem in the first place. So you've got yeah, like you say, you've got to run away at that point. So it's really amazing that you're doing that. And I've had a few projects over the years similar to what you've done, and it is very effective and it's very, very, very good. So I'm really excited to see how it goes for you. Which is amazing. So today we are talking, as always, about trauma, a little bit about your story and what's got you here. I ask every single guest I have, I ask them the same question. So for you, what is trauma?
There are so many different levels in which to answer this question. And I suppose I'll try and answer them on as many levels as possible, being a holistic practitioner. From a neurological standpoint, trauma is a disorganized nervous system that has trapped energy flowing through the kind of neurological circuits, the embedded neurological connections, both in the synapses in the brain, obviously flooded throughout the system. It's when energy becomes trapped within those parts of the body and is chaotic and is perhaps stuck. From a neurological standpoint, when you go through an overwhelming situation, you shut down a lot of your higher faculties. So your prefrontal cortex gets shut down, your hippocampus gets shut down because of all the stress hormones. And when those areas of your brain get shut down, you're still processing the experience, but not on a cognitive level. You're processing it at a deep, visceral level in a state of immobilization, which is just pure terror. And what happens is you're still going through the experience and you're still processing it, and all the neurological kind of representations of it being imprinted in the brain are free floating. They've not been integrated through the hippocampus, which is the kind of the hub of memory. And so you can go through an event, overwhelming, shut you down, and maybe you won't experience anything for a while, but then you go through a similar experience, or there's a trigger that reminds you, and all of a sudden you go boom, back into the experience. And the reason why is because that part of the residue that's left over in your neurology has been snapped, and you're now viewing the world through an implicit memory. An implicit memory is you don't have any context for it. There's 2 types of memory, implicit and explicit. Implicit means you're just looking at the world through the lens of the past without really knowing. Explicit is like, oh yeah, I've been here before, I know what's going on. When you're traumatized, you shut down and you go straight back into your experience because it's implicit processing of the world. So from a neurological standpoint, that seems to be what's going on. So we use obviously lots of different approaches, which I know you're very keen for, polyvagal theory. With the kind of psychological lens of looking at trauma, I see it as a kind of fragmented library. So we've all got a library in our mind that organizes different bits of information, categorizes it, and allows us to draw on past experiences to process the future or where we're at in the present. When you go through trauma, I imagine it as just buckling the bookcases, and all of the information from the library is just scattered all over the place. and you're trying to pick it back up again. And, that idea of having a fragmented mind is although it sounds quite harsh, it also permits the opportunity to understand how you might piece it all together again through somatic practices, through reflection. From an emotional standpoint, I like to see trauma as, just like any emotion, having this gravitational pull, like a solar system. And the heavier the emotion, the bigger the gravitational pull. And emotions are electrochemical energy that goes through the nervous system. And we've called them emotions because Homo sapiens have language. If we didn't have language, it would just be, it would be a sound or a bit of music. So emotions are just what we've labeled them. But they do have a gravitational pull. And then the question becomes, how do you get out of orbit with this emotion? And then finally, from a spiritual standpoint, I believe trauma is here to liberate us from the past. I believe trauma and all of that which comes from the traumatic experience helps us detach from the dogmatic structures that have kept us in chains for a very, very long time. Speaking as a human now, without borders, without a country, we have been kept in chains by our own limitations and limitations enforced on us by others. And you only question society to that depth when you're going through that depth of experience. So trauma for me has liberated me to see what I was doing and the fact that I was the one responsible for it, and gave me an opportunity to pave the way for a new future.
Yeah, thank you so much for breaking it down like that. That's really amazing, especially people have different language, don't they, to explain different experiences and values and belief systems. So yeah, thank you so much for breaking it down in that way. My brain was kind of exploding with excitement as you were explaining it this way. So we've just, as people didn't know already, we've just done our anniversary episode with loads of like 9 men, haven't we? So we're both like super wired. But no, it's such a great way to see it. And obviously I come from a polyvagal perspective. That's my language. So we all have a different way of talking about these things. But time and time again I hear about it being an overwhelm of the system that just can't be processed potentially in that moment, and you're carrying it through with you. And until that sort of processing is completed in whatever way that needs to happen, it will inform the world that you live in. The lens that you see the world in, like you said, is informed by that. And I find that, I don't know about yourself in your line of work, but you can tell, I've got to a point now, even though I'm not a therapist like you, I could tell when somebody is not in their body or not present or not. You could see the trauma within their body language, the way they move, the way they speak, the stories that they tell you. So do you find when you're working with your clients that you as soon as they kind of walk in the door, are you able to like sort of pick up on these things, do you think? Do you think that's something that, as part of a therapist journey, that happens to you? Pick up on it?
Yeah, I think that empathic attunement, that sense of emotional contagion and the transfer of energetics. Some people call it transference and countertransference, but sometimes that's referred to in a sense of unconscious roles being played out. But there's also, from the energy world, you're picking up on another entity's energy field, their heart coherence perhaps, which has a electromagnetic field, and you're entangled within that dance. So yes, I do feel the trauma when it's in the room. And like you said, you can see when someone goes into a trauma response because they shut down and everything changes and it goes into this real dark place. And so being a practitioner who's been down to that dark place and found a bit of light is what I suppose gives me the courage to go down there with other people.
Yeah, it sounds, what you said there reminds me a lot of neuroception from a polyvagal perspective. So, you just like two nervous systems dancing together.
Yeah.
This picking up on each other. Sometimes you don't have a conscious choice over what your nervous system's doing. And as soon as I discovered neuroception and all that kind of stuff, it really, I said to a previous guest, it transformed my massage business. It completely made me a much better massage therapist because when they walked in, I was able to tap into that neuroception and go, what does my client need right now? What does their nervous system need? Not what do they need? What does the nervous system need? So they can have the best possible massage they can. And honestly, my reviews were good anyway, but my reviews just went crazy after that because I was obviously able to give them the needs that they needed, and they just transformed by the end of the session on all levels, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. And I didn't realize that sports, when I trained in sports massage, I could end up being a facilitator of that space. So beautiful. But what you just talked about there is kind of handy, because that was the next question anyway. So have you suffered trauma yourself? Have you seen it with your family? How has your trauma journey informed you to where you are today? What's been a process for you?
Yeah. So hopefully I can give a clear account. My brother has psychosis. He suffered very bad paranoid schizophrenic panic attacks, I suppose you could describe them as, when he was very young. When I say very young, I mean around 14 to 16, that left him with psychosis. So I grew up kind of around that. And psychosis doesn't just visit randomly. I believe that there is a lineage, right? Like a perhaps a deficit of something within the brain, perhaps an energetic residue from the past within the family. And so I was always around that energy, even before it kind of kicked off and went into psychosis, as presented as psychosis anyway. I was always around that energy. And so I always found it hard to trust people because he's my brother. And I honestly didn't feel like I could trust him when I was younger. And the relationship that we built together was disturbing and often very intrusive on our parents. And my dad, bless his soul, I say bless his soul, he's not dead. He just, I'm very spiritual, so I speak in some abstract terms some days. My dad, when he had his business when we were younger, was very impulsive and quite angry at times. And although I feel guilty to speak about him that way because he helped me in life in so many ways and he's been so supportive, there's this kind of archetypical father role of being this tyrannical force. And whether or not they know themselves to be that, they kind of take on this they take on the role of the persecutioner. And I believe that that's what put my brother into a bit of a prison, the kind of echo of the past with my dad. And I never really kind of looked at it that way. I went to uni, studied drama and psychology, did the normal uni stuff, messing about. My ego was flourishing. I was really kind of in my narcissistic prime, being the captain of the lacrosse team. Everything was flowing well. I was getting away with this, that, and the other, being quite just disheartening as a person, really. I never really held space for anyone. I would describe myself back then as being very egotistical and, like I said, very narcissistic, which I believe is a repercussion of the system in which we live in. I believe that narcissism is a coping strategy for trauma early in your life. So I don't blame myself. As time evolved and I got involved with the wrong people, taking drugs and taking even more drugs, and it just spiraled, right? When they say when you get involved with the wrong people, it really spirals. Well, this really spiraled. I was hanging out with people that had done, 4 or 5 seasons in Ibiza. And we had drug dealers in the group, and everyone still had that ego mentality left over from uni, right? The kind of like, just do it, right? The initiation mentality. And things just spiraled out of control. And it started to open up those parts of my mind that my brother had described for so long. I went to a music festival and woke up one morning, I think on the Saturday morning, the second day, and I took the biggest amount of ketamine I'd ever taken and will ever take. The line was just, it was ridiculous. And we were kind of floating around it for a while. And basically, I got down to the bottom of this hill because it'd been raining the whole time. I was kind of like slipping around, and big group of people around us. I slipped over, hit the ground. And obviously, when you slip over and hit the ground in the music festival, that's very funny, right? You're like, hey, that's great. But when you're on, enough ketamine to see yourself off into a K-hole, it wasn't very funny. And I went into a K-hole And the K-hole effectively lasted for 3 days, because it basically, the narcissistic ego loops in my mind of me being great, the best, and people loving me suddenly switched to people don't like me, they're out to get me, and the whole world is not in my favor. And that's a big shift. And it's taken me till now to realize that what happened was the energy in my body is determining the story I'm telling myself, right? So you organize the world into how you feel. We are the co-creators of our life in that way. It's a dance, right? Like you said, neuroinception is a dance between two nervous systems. Well, the outside world and the internal world is in that dance. And obviously I had no idea about that. I was just a lacrosse captain, drug taker, rave boy. And then boom, went into this K-hole. And for 3 days at the festival, I was seeing stuff. I was seeing things popping out people's faces. I was hearing voices that weren't there. I had this overwhelming sensation that someone was going to get me. And what's even kind of, I suppose, even more bizarre about that story, so why didn't I leave? Like, why did I stay? And I reflected on that, and the reason is because my ego wouldn't let me leave. I was trying to piece myself back together. And I think that that's what we do in the initial stages, and I believe that's what we're seeing now with the return to work, the return to the new normal, is it's a flight to health. People want to get out of this kind of isolation period and just get back to normal really quickly. And that's a macro scale. Mine was a micro scale, and it fucked me up. Excuse my language. It really, I stayed there, and I didn't really contextualize the whole experience. I just carried on like normal. I didn't take drugs for a little while. I think I didn't take ketamine for about 2 or 3 months. I was still going out taking ecstasy because that's all I knew, right? Raving and partying and, going out with girls was all we knew. And then I had another episode exactly like the one at the festival. And I knew that something bad was happening. But by that point, I was in a relationship with a girl who came into the group. And me and that girl had quite a lot of history. And turns out she had a lot of history with the drug dealer in the group. So things became it was like that triad relationship, it became very toxic very quick. And with a lot of drugs, with that energy in the air, it's not very good. And loads of different things happened, and it basically finished with me making a complete tit of myself. But actually, it turned out to be a massive blessing, and they just ostracized me from the group. I was just communicating how I felt about all our drug taking, obviously because of what happened to me, and they wanted to keep going. And I was clinging on to the idea of myself for such a long time. Fortunately, my friend asked if I wanted to go to Berlin to coach lacrosse. This is at the point where it was only just on drugs I was having these experiences. And I went, and it was the best thing that's ever happened to me. But when I was there, I had an episode, not on drugs, on the train, where I had the same experience, but there was no context for it. And then I obviously worked out PTSD and hypervigilance. And from that experience, I've just been slowly integrating it into my conceptual framework of understanding the nervous system, understanding the psychology, understanding entrainment, emotional contagion, understanding all of these different concepts, because without them, I wouldn't have got out of it. And without the somatic practices that allowed me to get back into my body, I definitely would still be, in a lot of trauma. And the one thing that, outside of my friend inviting me to Berlin, the one thing that pulled me back was I was at Shoreditch High Street Station. I had seen a picture of my girlfriend, or my ex-girlfriend, on Instagram with a friend of mine, and they were all having a great time. Like, it was the summer, it was when the World Cup was on. They're all having a great time, having beers and that. And I'm obviously fragmented, no friends. And I was at the train station, and I felt an impulse in my body to want to jump in front of the train. It wasn't a conscious decision. I didn't think, oh yeah, I want to end it. That never really came in, but my body wanted to. And in that moment, I was lucky. I just clinged on to this pole, and it stopped me from doing it. And when I walked onto the train, sat down, I was like, fuck. And there was a drug addict walking about, suffering. Just, she hadn't had anything for ages. And I was like, I get you. And all of a sudden, it just started to make a bit more sense. Like from that moment, things just started to open up a little more. It's like, this is what this is all about, Tom. Like, you were a fucking egotistical, narcissistic person, and this flattened you. It's called an ego death, I believe. It flattened you. And I do have an ability to speak to people at a level that helps them comfort themselves. And that experience made me fully aware of the meaning that my trauma had come to teach me, is that we are all in this together. It's not just about me, and that you have the potential to go into these places with people and help them find meaning and purpose.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. And it's interesting that you mentioned about, you had the ego side of it, but also you were that group of people, and that's all you knew at that point. I guess we're built for community, aren't we? We're built to connect, even if it's toxic. I guess we stay in these situations because a connection of any sort is still connection. Would you say that is partly why you didn't break yourself out of it, because it's still community at the end of the day, isn't it? Even if it is bad.
What you've said is just really giving me goosebumps, because it's something that's come up in my own process quite a lot. Is this, you blame yourself. There's so much shame around what you could have done, what you should have done, but you just didn't know any better. That was your level of awareness at the time. And your level of awareness when you're living a very unconscious life is an amalgamation of everything that's happened to you. Some of it's not very good. And so you're just responding to life in the best way you see possible. And that group came along, and it was fun. It was great fun. We had some great times. And I found it very hard to get away from it, because there is that kind of need in us to be in a group. And it wasn't actually until I realized that things got really bad when the girl I was with, just finished the relationship. I mean, I forced her to with my actions, but it made me realize that her touch, our relationship, was the only thing keeping me above board. And when she cut it off, I just fell. I went so deep into the kind of existential vacuum, so to speak, that, I was clinging on to stuff, and I was making myself act to fall. And actually, I read a paper on the neuroscience of resilience at the start of my company being formed, which I'll send over to you. It talks about what trauma does to the brain and how it hits a part of the brain called the accumbens. I can't remember what it's called. It's beneath the prefrontal cortex on the external part of the limbic system, and it's there for social reward behavior. It's tied up in the dopamine circuits, and when you go through trauma, you get a rush of dopamine to that area, which is naturally seeking support and validation. And so all my behaviors at that time started to make sense, that I was clinging on to people and seeking validation so much because there was so much energy rushing through that part of my brain. Because in effect, from an evolutionary standpoint, when you get kicked out of the group, it means you're going to die. And that's still hardwired into our brain, into our neurology. And so I was acting out because I was just trying to cling on to the group. So learning about the brain has helped me massively, like I'm sure it's done for you.
Yeah, what you just mentioned there, I literally heard that because it's in Body Keeps a Score. What you're talking about, that part of the brain, he talks about the brain loads in that book. And as you started to try and say what it was, I try and think what it was as well from what Basil was saying in the book. But like you said, there's this ancient part of us, isn't there, that's just wired this way. I don't think we're ever going to lose it. This primal need for being seen, being heard, being understood, being safe, being part of community, and even talk about like sort of the hierarchy of community groups. Like, it's not that some people are meant to be leaders, someone's meant to be followers, but you need all the dynamics for a community to function. You can't just have 10 leaders. It just, on a primal level, it just wouldn't work. So, it's not about being lesser or more of, it's just we are adaptive from our experiences and, felt sense of self to know where we sit in that. I think we're constantly searching, aren't we, to see where we sit in society, within our groups. And if it's then informed by real positive play and safe and social activities. So at the end of the day, going out dancing, getting drunk, taking drugs, even though we know on a safe and social polyvagal level that's not great, there is still safe and social there, because you've got a common interest, even though it's really toxic. It's such good times, and you cannot beat yourself up about wanting a good time. The safe and social is addictive at the end of the day. It's in those scenarios you're talking about, it's just very, very damaging. And it sounded like you had a big dynamic with what you guys were going through. On the previous episode with Kieran, he was talking about, he ended up in a mental hospital and they gave him the wrong drugs, and it made his visionary stuff worse. He had an element of thinking he was Jesus. He felt what his brain was doing. And we discussed, I want to ask you about this, is that your brain has the ability to do all of this crazy stuff to you and make you see crazy shit. Your brain is so powerful that if you inform it with toxins and drugs and stuff, I guess like a dream state, your brain can do some crazy stuff. So I guess would you say what we're seeing is actually something the brain can actually do it? You're just allowing it to be conscious.
When I went to the ground and everyone was laughing, and it completely fragmented my social self, because a large part of our brain is responsible for the way we've been interpreted socially and with the way we are building ourselves socially. I think Carl Jung called it the persona. When I went to the ground and that happened, I was fumbling around for a little bit. I had to go back to my tent and get cleaned up, and I was like trying to piece it all together. Went to the entrance point and I just started getting more and more paranoid, like more and more. Went back, and all the friends at the time went off. I went back to my tent, and every time I was slipping into that kind of trauma, that feeling, that gravity that it has back into this trench, all the music just left. I couldn't hear the music from the festival. And all I could hear was people around me talking, laughing, saying, ha 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 ha, burying me into that trench. When I felt myself come back up again, by using little tools, the tools that I knew at that time, clinging on to, maybe taking some ecstasy, maybe doing a little bit of dance, like trying to think about people I knew, but I couldn't think of them, right? When I started to come back up again, the music came back on and the voices left, and I knew where I was again. And actually, when I was there again, and I was like, oh, wow, yeah, brilliant. The sun started coming out. And the only story that made sense to me at that time was that I was the one doing it all, right? Which is not good, because the context of that idea in Western society is the dogmatic idea of God, which is like a dude in the clouds punishing everyone, right? And the amount of guilt and shame that flooded my body and my mind because of the responsibility I felt for everything and all the bad things I'd done, again, just crippled me back into it. And the brain has that potential. I think it's described as a transducer. So it brings in conscious experiences, and then it meets it with the past experiences that you've had before. And there's a dance between the newness of life and the oldness of life. And that's all that was happening, that the energy in my body, my nervous system, was creating a narrative. And at that point, and I knew, this is when I knew it was a schizophrenic episode, the boundaries of myself expanded way beyond my body. And that's what happens when you've got schizophrenia. It activates parts of your right hemisphere where you don't have the boundaries of yourself anymore. And when I actually get triggered, which is very far and few between now, but when I do, I don't know where I am, right? I know that I'm seeing life here, but I feel everything. beyond that as well. So it's, yeah, the brain has some potential to really be an ally. The nervous system could be an ally, or it can definitely be your worst nightmare. And it's just how well you're regulating it. It's just how you're treating it.
Yeah, because as you're saying that, thank you, it kind of makes me, I've read it somewhere about to have a sense of the space that we're in, to understand the room that we're in, you need to be able to tap into all your senses, a bit like you're saying with the music. So your hearing, your sight, your taste, obviously like the hairs on your arm, picking up temperature, your homeostasis in your body based on room temperature. You need all of that online, you know, to understand where you are in this moment. And it feels like what trauma does quite a lot, especially drug-induced based trauma stuff, is that it just completely messes up that homeostasis and that ability to understand the space that you're in. And you get trapped in this weird kind of past, future, outside, inside space. I can't imagine it really. You know, I've had a lot of mental health issues, but not the stuff that you and Kieran, the previous episode, are talking about. I can't even go anywhere near that. But when you start learning stuff, I'm sure you know, when you start learning loads of stuff and reading loads of books, you're like, holy shit, this is amazing. Okay, that makes sense. And then you're able to have like this empowerment of being able to connect to yourself in a safe way, which sounds like you did. So with the process from those times as the party kid up to sort of to now, you said you managed to sort of somatically work your way through. What did that look like? What was that journey then? What did you start with therapy first, or did you learn about self-improvement first?
Yeah, I was, like I mentioned, I was fortunate enough to get invited out to Berlin, which the Berlin culture is quite inclusive, I would say, in comparison to our party scene. I was still partying, of course. And there was much more nature around where I was living. There's a really lovely park that was an airport, and they put this really lovely nature reserve in there. So I was chilling out there a lot. And nature actually downregulates upregulates the nervous system and kind of downregulates stress hormones better than anything else. Like if you want your parasympathetic nervous system online, go into nature and just immerse yourself in the experience. Take your shoes off, your socks off, do your grounding, feel all that kind of electric energy from the earth charging through the feet, and really throw yourself back into your true address, right? Because the body is the home of us. And to take it further than that, we are an amalgamation of all of the people that have come before us. And initially, it started off deeply within the cells of the earth. And when we die, we go back there. And so that the earth is our home. It's our true home. So going into nature when you're traumatized is a really good thing to do for yourself. Music, I listen to a lot of peaceful, ambient music. Was trying to take myself on a journey. Music activates parts of the right hemisphere that are responsible for social engagement. And because I was struggling socially, the music allowed me to activate those parts of my neurology that stopped them from pruning apart, stopped them from disappearing, because if you don't use it, you lose it. So I was doing all these techniques without really knowing that they were good for me. It's like my intuition was taking me there. And that's another thing that we don't talk about in society. Listen to your intuition more. And your intuition is different to your emotions, because your emotions, like we know, can be distorted and disorganized and quite chaotic. But there's an intuitive knowingness that surrounds your experience of what you kind of know you should be doing or could be doing in order to feel better. And I was just lucky enough to have a friend that invited me to get out of my context, which is super important. I managed to get out of my environment, be immersed in a new environment, meet new people over time. And then I was doing more and more breath work. So focusing your energy on anything is where you're putting your attention. And focusing your attention is like a self-directed experience. And every experience activates or triggers neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change. So if you learn how to focus on things that are grounding, if you learn how to focus on things that are empowering, and you learn how to focus on your healing, then you are making adaptations in your brain that are grounding, empowering, and healing. And so I was just trying to focus all my energy on my healing process, just chuck myself into it. Started reading Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. the psychiatrist and neurologist who went through the Holocaust. You know, he went through the depths of hell, I would describe that as. And although he paints a picture, a very bleak one, because it was a bleak experience, he still talks about how people found meaning. People still managed to find peace. There's so many passages in that book that gave me goosebumps for a very long time, and it helped me model. That's really good. You need a model, because we model off so many different things that aren't good for us. The news, drug-taking friends, family members who are trying to keep us trapped in their narrative. If you model yourself off of characters in history that are just an inspiration to the human spirit, it will bring you back to life again. So for me, how it happened is just an immersive experience, a holistic lifestyle. And I made a dedicated decision that no matter what, I was not going to stop trying.
It's so powerful, and that came up, didn't it, in our group chat too, about that not stopping and knowing that not everything that you approach is necessarily going to be the thing for you. But what you talked about there with nature and some of the stuff with the music, I was reading something the other day about connection, and connection doesn't need to be just with people. You can connect to anything, but that level of connection, which is a human need, is the bit that can help you start to heal, because connecting to anything is inclusive and makes you feel like it's not just you. And I'm sure that must help the ego on some level too, with connection. Like you said, being connected to nature, or like someone said about, what was it? Someone had a client and they said, I don't feel like I'm connected to any human beings. I feel like no human beings are here for me. No human beings are seeing me. I don't feel connected to anything. And they said to them, do you listen to music? And they said, yes. They said, you are connecting to a human being, because a human being wrote that piece of music. You love that piece of music, the drums, the guitar, the voice. That is a human being who's created something that you're listening to, that you have a deep love for. That is connection to another human being through the music. And there's connection all around us. Everything. The chair I sat on was probably made by a human being. We're all connected on some level. And if the virus hasn't taught us anything, how connected we are, you take one person out of a chain of things in the economic world, the whole thing falls apart, because without that person there doing that person can't do this. And it just makes you see we do need each other a lot, functionally. And obviously, like, there is always a way to connect to yourself and that around you, and it doesn't have to be obvious. You know, loving a bird singing outside, you're connecting with that bird song. It's so beautiful. There's a dance there, and if you can just hold that within you, we're making it sound really easy. It isn't easy at all. It's difficult.
No,
but
yeah.
I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there, because I just realised how many people feel they're not connected to anything, which is why they're depressed or whatever they're going through. But really, they're connected to their depression at the end of the day. There's always connection. You just need, like you said, start to establish other ways of connecting so you can come into your body. Because if you're not connected to your body, then you're already, hundreds of miles behind on your journey, because you're not feeling or sensing anything. And I could talk about this loads, so I'm going to stop. But
that was beautiful. Honestly, like, that was a really beautiful conceptual way of looking at the necessity for connection. And it reminded me of what Joseph Campbell said in The Power of Myth. It's a different ego that sees an it to an ego that sees another. So if you're looking at your environment as just being filled with its, objects, right? These kind of materialistic, clinical things that science has made us all think of the universe as, just dead stuff, then you will feel that way. You will feel that because you are making yourself through your connection. You're making yourself through the dance between you and that which you interact with. If everything in your space is dead, which is exactly what it feels like when you're in a depressive hole, you just, for some reason, all the substance from life is gone. The way to bring it back is to engage the senses, bring yourself back to your body, like you said, and start to see even the smallest thing as another, right? Even this mug that I'm drinking my tea from, like you said, there's a story behind it. And it's serving me in ways that I'm not aware of unless I think about it. So if it wasn't for this cup, then I wouldn't be able to nourish myself with the liquid. And without that, then I wouldn't be able to obviously nourish my body and to maintain homeostasis like we've talked about. And so connection is found through your interpretation of that which you interact with. And for me, after reading Man's Search for Meaning, went out of my way to take on 100% responsibility for myself. Because if these people could go through the Holocaust and find something that made it all, make sense a little bit, there's a passage in the book with a woman who's slowly passing away, and Viktor Frankl's speaking to her, and she says, "The tree's been speaking to me." And it's just one branch of a tree that she can see through her window. And Viktor Frankl's like, "Oh, she must be delirious." And he goes, "What does the tree say?" And the tree was saying, "Don't worry, my child. We're in this together. You're safe." In so many words. Like, in the depths of hell, she has touched something that we all know to be true. When we go into nature and we are held by a tree, she found that in hell. And if she can do it, we can all do it. And it's our responsibility.
Yeah. Definitely. And we are meaning-making machines, which is why our thoughts tend to get a bit out of hand, because we're always searching for meaning. Right now, everyone's trying to search for meaning behind COVID. At the end of the day, there isn't necessarily a meaning for it happening, but it's remembering that there's meaningful things all around us. And I think wasn't there a story from the Holocaust about somebody who managed to find meaning with it in the sense that he would look after and care for the people in the room that they were kept in or whatever. So he cared for them till their dying day in the most horrific situation, but him being able to care for those people, number one, gave him a sense of meaning in that moment, and also gave those people connection to their dying moments. And I think that's another beautiful way to look at it, that if we were all in that situation, not everyone's able to pull that off. But I probably butchered that story, but it was something to do with them looking after all the people around them and making sure they're okay and make sure everyone had the right amount of bread or whatever. And it was so beautiful to hear it. And as meaning-making machines, people get really obsessed about everything has to be meaningful rather than just seeing that everything is meaningful. So I hear a lot of people talk about things being materialistic and, they're obsessed by possessions, but sometimes certain things you have are insanely meaningful and have a story. And I'm currently selling lots of my stuff, but there's some stuff I won't sell because it does have a deep meaning. And that's a beautiful connection I have with an it item, like you said, but really it's more than that. And, if it brings a sense of meaning to my life and I have a connection with it, who's anybody to judge that? As long as obviously it's done healthily. And just one last thing before we carry on, because I realise I'm getting a bit excitable, is, when people say they feel like my friends, even though you've never met them. So say you've got like a YouTuber you really like, for example, right? And you're like, and people say, yeah, he's like a friend of mine. People are like, what are you on about? They're not your friend, because there's some kind of dynamic or situation that requires someone to be a friend. So well, hang on a minute. If you love listening to that person on a daily basis when they release a podcast and you feel connected to them, you're connected to that human being, whether they know you or not. Doesn't matter. And for me, it's wrestling. I've always loved wrestling. And there's a load of guys that do wrestling reviews and podcasts. I could just sit there, listen to them. And they feel like friends to me, even though they don't know who I am. There's nothing wrong with that. That is totally normal and totally beautiful, because we want to connect to others. Anyway, that was just a random thing to talk about. Hopefully it's useful to people. So obviously you went through this journey of, become more embodied, to go into nature, all this kind of stuff. So as that progressed, did it lead to therapy, or did you do most of it by yourself and then trained in therapy and healed through your training? What was like the process?
So I did a little bit of training before I was actually involved in the drug circle. So I got involved with the drug circle as my MSc was ending. And so my original goal was to go on and be a therapist. I was involved in my psychotherapy. I was still, again, heavily engaged in the narcissistic feedback loops and the ego, the idea of myself. And this girl that I was with, she was the reason why I pretty much stayed in that group, because she wanted to party, she wanted to have fun, and I felt such a connection to her, and I romanticized the idea of her so much that it just kept me clinging on. So I studied a little bit before. Obviously, all that stuff happened. I couldn't work with clients. Then I started to integrate myself. I started to look at more somatic practices. So I had the MSc in psychotherapy. I then started learning more and more about neuroscience, because I needed to know about my nervous system, needed to know about neurology and biochemistry and hormones and all that sort of stuff. And then I started to piece together my own little model, my own kind of little approach, I suppose, and drawing on all of these great thinkers and all these people that have sacrificed their life for, trauma, effectively, to pull people out of trauma, like the people that you've mentioned. And so I just started piecing together my little model, and eventually over time, I started to work inside of an agency when I was seeing people for free, just getting my hours up. And then I kind of broke off from there, and I did a performance coaching diploma, which the reason why I did that is because I saw counseling and psychotherapy as, unfortunately, the dogmatic sides of those approaches is very one directional. It thinks mainly in the past, and it believes in lots of ways that going into the past and talking about it is what will allow you to move off into the future. But effectively, that's not what we're seeing. What we're seeing is that people are just staying detached, or they're saying attached to their therapist, and they're becoming quite dependent on them. It's not in all cases. Obviously, there's lots of wonderful therapists out there, and there's lots of good that therapy is doing. But without understanding the whole of the person, I didn't see transformation as being that possible, or it being accessible and efficient enough. Like, I've worked now with individuals that have been in the medical system, the medical model, for a very long time. I'm working with someone at the moment who's been in there for 14 years, completely dehumanized, just given no hope, put in a box, given some tablets, relationship dynamics in his life, not very good. I've been working with him for 4 months. He said to me the other day that he woke up one morning and he realized he was happy. He realized that he'd not been happy for a very long time. And I don't actually think he thought of the last time he was happy. And I don't believe I was the one who did that, not at all. I believe that his openness to engage with a new process, a new paradigm of looking at his story from the stance of mythology and spirituality, and looking at meaning and purpose, understanding the impact of environments, context, understanding the impact of your language on your neurology, him understanding the power he has and the fact he's pulling his own strings, has liberated him a little bit. And he had a moment in the kitchen where he didn't think at all. This guy's got deep psychosis, and deep psychosis is characterized by just intrusive thoughts on a loop all the time. He was cleaning his kitchen the other day, and he was just in peace, and he cried. And I don't know what's happened. That's the honest truth. I don't know what's happened. Perhaps because I've been to that depth and seen some of the things he's describing, just with different masks on, that when I'm talking to him, like the transference and counter-transference, there's no judgment. There's no part of me thinking what the fuck? I'm like, yeah, man. Yeah, I get you. And he know, and the way that I'm communicating to him seems to be implicitly he gets it. So it's just been a really powerful, humbling experience to go from where I was to where I am now, and slowly letting go of the ties to the past and defining myself by labels. And, even as a holistic practitioner who has been trained in the social cultural model, I can't help but be tied to some dogmatic structures because it's so entrenched within our narrative. Been here for such a long time.
Yeah, definitely. There's a few things that came up for me there, which was, self-reflection, self-awareness, self-acceptance, all really important things for us to be able to walk through healing. But I don't know if this is true necessarily, but it's what I kind of believe in, is that people are helping people to heal. There's no one out there that can heal you. That's not a thing. It's anybody can heal themselves, but they do need a space created for them by another human being to allow them to heal themselves, someone that can hear them, see them, understand them, and maybe even ask the questions that they can't find meaning around or the sense around. The job of a good therapist or healer, inverted commas, is to allow that person to heal in their presence and just be there for them. Human instinct, really. And I know this from time to time again for people I've interviewed and the people that I've supported indirectly through therapists, that sometimes the modality is completely irrelevant. It's the space that's held by the other human being. And I know this. I went to see, just briefly, I'll tell you about this, but I think I might tell you before, but I was struggling a lot with anxiety and thoughts getting out of hand. I knew I had some trauma. And I went to see sort of a meditation, mindfulness Buddhist lady. And she, amazing lady, amazing experience, amazing background. But when I walked into the room, she had a very specific way of dealing with clients. And that wasn't something that was going to work with me in that space. And she actually essentially gave me a panic attack. Because even though she's very experienced, she had this approach that this is how I help people. And she just stayed silent for about a couple of minutes and just looked at me to pick up on what I was going through. And my biggest fear is awkward spaces like that where, and I'm a chatty person, and she essentially made me more and more anxious as minutes went by. And then she opened up and said, "So why are you here today?" That was a traumatizing experience for me, being held in a space by somebody who wasn't getting me or understanding me, seeing me. I think Buddhist culture is absolutely amazing and beautiful and awesome. But when there's a human being behind anything, they need to hold the space, which is kind of comes into what my next question is for you. So do you feel that what you've been through and the traumas you've had and the healing that you're probably still going through allows you to inform that space? Do you think that's where your power resides from your lived experience?
100%. What you just said about the space that was created for you reminded me of the conversation I had with my dad the other day about this dogmatic presupposition that's kind of thrown into the space or broadcasted into a relationship, that you become aware of something, perhaps in your past, something you've done. You maybe feel guilty about it. So the awareness is the spotlight. The guilt is the rising emotion. The dogma is you saying, "And I'll never forgive myself." So if a practitioner's approach is so rigid and so stuck, I would say, and there's no room for change, I would say that's dogma. And I would say that dogma is felt so strongly by everyone because we've been in it for such a long time. And you were looking for liberation. You were looking for openness. You were looking for possibility. And you felt that that wasn't in the room. And so you wanted to leave. You wanted to leave. And it's great that you've obviously managed to find something from that. And I think that's a very funny quote you got there. But yeah, for me, I believe that my experiences and the depths in which I went to have definitely liberated parts of my psyche that have allowed me to tap into what's happening in the immediacy of the experience. If something comes up that I just need to listen to and just feel and just maybe hum with, or do some breathing with, or meditate with, or get up and do some stretching with, right? Or get them to rearrange their environment, the space they're in, to take back some control, some independence, I'll do that, right? If it needs a chair next to the person to speak to someone, to get it out, to do that, then we can do that. If it's about, standing up and shaking hands, right? Or putting on a bit of music, making it a bit tribal in the room. There's a great story from the apartheid regime when all the trials were going on and Desmond Tutu was trying to facilitate the whole thing. When people were becoming traumatized, he stopped the person and he got the whole audience into a dance, into humming, because he knew that the communal sound was what's going to calm down the person, get them back into safety, able to speak their truth. And so when you're working with a person, you're working with so much depth, so much complexity, and so much possibility that dogma, nah, it's not the way.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's kind of seeing, it's quite complex because that being has got all of this history, all of these coping mechanisms that have come and gone over the years. They might not be using the same coping mechanism anymore, but there's an aftermath from the original one. And it's kind of like, just like you said, even if it's like a physical change of the room, or let's say get moving, in Bessel van der Kolk's book, he talks about move, breathe, chant as really great ways to realign your body and get you going, and drumming all together, maybe drumming and doing chanting noises. You're all doing the same act. You're all in it together. Very beautiful community thing to do. And like I think we're talking about this holding the space is then even more tricky if that person is severely traumatized too, because you really, really need to pick up on what can help them feel safe. If they do not feel safe in that moment, there is no way of connecting to them and allowing them to shift through it. And it's not an easy thing for us to talk about today about how individual traumas work. But if you're sat directly in front of somebody and that's your style, but someone being in front of them is a little bit intense because they've got a lot of abuse history, don't sit in front of them. Move your chair. It's not rocket science, but at the same time, it's not easy either. So as we sort of move through kind of the journey that you've been on, so when you're working with clients and stuff, do you sort of combine different modalities based on what we've just discussed, but also do you give them practices and stuff that they can have a go at when they're by themselves? Is it a combination of self-care and so co-regulation, self-regulation?
So in the initial stages, it's all about understanding the client's frame of reference, the way they're mapping out meaning in their world, which is to kind of get them to look at their value system. So I asked them quite big questions to do with if there were 2 rules in life that everyone should follow, what would they be? Who inspires you the most in life and why? So we look at kind of value systems so we have an idea of who this person is at the deepest level. And then from that place, we then explore self-regulation techniques. But really, it's all about what comes up in the session. So like, when I first meet the client, I don't just go in with what are your values, or I don't just go in with kind of, I'll teach you how to self-regulate. Really, I just want to hear that person's story. So I'd like to just understand that person and where they've been up to this point and how they got there and the meaning they've given it, which is what I meant by frame of reference. So our frame of reference is made up of all of our experiences and the meaning that we've given it. From there, it's then about understanding the person in a little bit more depth. And I give reflective questions so they can go away and reflect on kind of, these deeper questions. And then if I feel it's necessary to teach some self-regulation techniques, then we'll do something like that. If we go into some deeper, darker parts of the cave, so to speak, then we will use meditation as an anchor to come back into the present moment. And somatic practices are great because they manage in a way to organize all the information from the session. So I'd never like to think of my clients leaving feeling triggered or feeling like they can't cope. And so I like to finish the session with a kind of gentle somatic practice. And if that's something that resonates with the client, then we might go into deeper states of kind of practices rather of meditation. So it's a combination really of everything. And alongside understanding that person's frame of reference that's built on past experiences, I'm also understanding that person's context. I'm also understanding that person's goals and dreams for the future. I'm also understanding how that person regulates himself, who's in their friendship circle. And we're just exploring whatever comes up for the client. And whatever comes up and however I respond is really through my presence with that person. So if I'm being present with what comes up, then the therapeutic belief system is what comes out, the intervention that I use, be it spoken word or a practice or a process or a reflective moment of silence. The belief is that that has come from my intuition. That's come from my intuition, which is obviously in a dance with this other person. And so my interventions are what the person needs in that moment. And obviously there's times where you mess up. there's times where you say stuff and you're like, shouldn't have said that. That's no, come on. But it's the willingness to have a reflective moment then, but then just to let it go. Because what you're modeling to the client is that you mess up as well, but you're willing to let it go, learn from it. And if you mess up enough, it's a perfect opportunity in the session, because relationships, long-term ones, are built through ruptures and repairs. So every time you have a little rupture, perhaps your intervention didn't strike a chord, or perhaps you said something which was quite triggering and they weren't ready, or perhaps you were just completely off the mark altogether. That's a little rupture. And if you have the courage to say, I noticed what I said caused something in the space, I wondered if we can talk about it. That amount of transparency is not always done. It's not always seen. And so what you're saying is that I'm going to be transparent for this whole process, and you're building trust. So I've gone the very long way around this answer, but in the initial stages, it's all about building trust and rapport through working with the immediacy and understanding the person's frame of reference. And then as it evolves over time, if that person is naturally more self-directed, then really I'm just using my frameworks and tools to walk alongside them. If that person needs a little bit more guidance, then there are things that I could suggest in the session to explore. So that's a very long way of saying it depends on the client, it depends on the context, and it completely depends on what comes up.
Yeah, thank you. And I realized that the question, the way it's laid out, kind of went slightly against my points in the previous question, which is that obviously there's no script for this. You know, you hold the space, you connect, you find out more. Like I say, they have different ways of living their life. They have different dynamics with partners, with jobs. You have to really understand what triggers them, what brings them joy.
Yeah.
You know, that's a process, and you're letting them self-reflect and self-connect.
Yeah.
And I really love what you said there. And some approaches you'll be able to pick up on aren't the best way. I've had a lot of coaches who ask me a lot of questions. So they asked me to answer a question to why this. I really struggle with that. I don't like the concept of answering a question because I don't know the answer, because I feel slightly lost in who I am. So those questions are quite upsetting because I don't know the answer and I feel like I should have one. You know what I mean? So it's important for me to be able to like with my coach, Steve is amazing. He's very good at picking up on energy shifts. So you have an energy shift when you talk about something, or maybe you had a realization that created a shift, and you need to go away and process that shift. Your body processes it, not necessarily cognitively, but go away for the week and allow that processing to take place. So when you come back to the session, you may have a different thing going on for you. And I love that idea of shifts from triggers and stuff and how you can process it. I really like that open space to be able to go, oh my God, right, I didn't realize, wow, okay, yeah, shit, that could be the reason. And you give that person this empowerment, like, shit, yeah, maybe it was the way my dad brought me up. I never thought about it that way. And you empower them with a narrative where they can go, whoa, shit, you're right. I do have the power in myself. You've just given them a whole new resource, haven't you, that they can use.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll ever get into therapy work or coaching, but I think I'd probably really enjoy it, just seeing those shifts that you probably see. It must be so, so beautiful to watch your clients shift and change. I mean, it must be, how amazing is it? It must be amazing.
It's nothing like it. I mean, it makes all the training, makes all the journeying, it makes all the reading, just makes all of it worthwhile. Like it's the purpose, it's the meaning, it's to see the transmutational process unfold in real time, the alchemy of the old self into the new self, which is perhaps more adaptable and more akin to who that person really is, past the layers of trauma and, you know, experiences of all kinds that have come to, you know, hide the self, protect the self. And when you see it pop its head, or when you see the transformation, or when you see the shift in energy, and there's a liberation, you can feel it in the space. And in a way, it's quite selfish, because when a person near you becomes liberated, you yourself start to become more liberated, because you see the potential actualize itself. And when you see that, your mirror neurons are going off, and the mirror neurons pick up on intentions, thoughts, emotions from people in close proximity to you. And so if you see a liberation, if you see a transmutational process very close up, that is going to be activating the same thing within you.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And, I have to say, all the people that I've met along the way, I've had lots of healing treatments and stuff, but what I've learned from all these people I've interviewed is going to change my life forever, because their insights allow me to have personal insights and go, holy shit, this is amazing. So I find that my most therapeutic process has been meeting people like you and everybody before you. It's been absolutely transformational, which is why getting out there and finding like-minded people is probably one of the best healers out there, be part of community seen and heard. So I just want to thank you so much for joining me today, Tom. And I'm always wary that someone may not be able to say everything they want to say. So is there anything that you feel like you've missed, or are you happy with everything we said?
Yeah, I think that, I just wanted to say thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been, it's such a wonderful kind of result or outcome from this whole process we find ourselves in, that we're meeting new people and building new communities and networking and sharing stories and holding space. So I want to thank you very much for inviting me on. And if you're listening to this and you're going through trauma, you're going through an experience that has made your world shift, I'd say try your best to decrease the time frame in which you project yourself into experiences. Like, naturally we project ourselves off into the future, but when you're stuck in an emotion, you can't help but perceive everything as being very akin to that emotion. So for me, it was about bringing myself into the present every single moment of the day. Whenever I caught myself slipping into the gravity of that emotion, bring myself back in some way, be it movement, be it music, be it connection of any kind. Whatever works well for you, just try and make it consistent and reach out, because there's people there to hold space for you.
Definitely. That's really beautiful. Thank you. And what's next for you with holistic transitioning and your own work too? What's it look like 5 years from now?
So I've had a couple of people say that I should have a go writing a book. So I figured I might give it a go, just start piecing together some ideas. I've already got somewhat of a foundational structure, talking a little bit about my trauma, my upbringing, my knowledge finding my knowledge and finding my feet through the turbulence, and then obviously what I do now, and perhaps even talking about the client work and how I've seen quite rapid transformation within people. As a company, holistic transitioning is continue to evolve. What we have taken it as a base level is that we want it to be a self-organizing system, which means that it will evolve to what the environment asks of it. So at this time, what's needed more now than ever is holistic services to be readily available at a very affordable price. And so we've made a online holistic community platform where people can engage with different practitioners live throughout the day. We have different practitioners from sound healing to breathwork, meditation, family support, psychotherapists. I also do my psychology, sustainable living. We've got dance, music, everything you can imagine to bring into your week, and a sense of community there to hold it all together. So at the moment, we've just been piecing together the last bits of safeguarding and legal procedures, ready to go live on Monday, Mental Health Week.
Oh, amazing. Monday. How exciting. That's relevant now in the moment we're recording this, obviously. It probably makes no sense a couple of But but brilliant. So how can people find you online? What's the best places to check out?
So if you've got Instagram, holistic_transitioning is a good spot to find us. If you're on LinkedIn, then we're starting to post more on our LinkedIn for holistic transitioning. Our website is holistic-transitioning.co.uk. There's lots of resources, lots of ways to kind of reach out, and obviously just try and pick what works for you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. I'll put links in, loads of links to everything you're doing anyway in the video description. And for anybody listening, go and check out episode 10 of the Man Cove Wellbeing talk show, in which Tom is featuring. There's 8 other guys on there too, so well worth a listen to. But Tom, thank you so much. And I know we will do loads of work together anyway. We'll have many projects in the pipeline, I'm sure, as time goes by.
Yeah, man, that's exciting.
Yeah, I just want to thank you so much for all your support and being part of this today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Love you. Thank you. I say love you then.
Love you
I got a
too,
bit
man.
excited there. I love everyone, so thank you everybody for listening, and we'll be back next time where we'll be speaking to the amazing Sarah Wainwright, who's in Australia, and we're going to be talking all things trauma-informed parenting. So I'm super excited about that, especially with a childhood of trauma myself. So check that out. That'll be coming up next time. So thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.